Indigenous Cultures Available to Save Humanity by Raquel Urroz Canán. Audiobook. Las culturas autóctonas disponibles para salvar a la humanidad, de Raquel Urroz Canán. Audiolibro. Traducción y locución en inglés por Daniela Mena. Translated into the English language and narrated by Daniela Mena. Pyramidal temple with 9 levels dedicated to the deity Kukulkan, or feathered serpent, known as Quetzalcoatl in Anahuac, identified with wisdom and knowledge. It is inscribed with symbolism that alludes to important information recorded in the solar calendar, the Soliskin, and the calendar wheel. All of these are compelling evidence of the high scientific and spiritual level of the indigenous cultures. Cocoa transformed into chocolate provides health and pleasure. Indigenous culture transformed into daily practice brings life.
Aérica.
Introduction. Ancient societies, especially those that inhabited the territory that is now Mexico, developed through successful adaptation to the different environments provided by the topography and biodiversity of the cultural area known as Mesoamérica. Based on the geography and ecology unique to this area, a rich cultural exchange took place, shaping a particular type of civilization shared by all peoples. This civilization encompassed specific ideologies and worldviews, with components including the sky, the earth, the seas, the wind, the rain, the clouds, the mountains, the stars, the trees, the flowers, the plants, the animals, and the rocks. However, this cosmology had a beginning and a development, with significant achievements that led to the transformation of space and the social practices carried out and expressed in the landscape and environment of indigenous communities to this day. These ancestral peoples accumulated a wealth of knowledge through their practical experience linked to nature and the land, eventually becoming a wisdom and a historical memory that still allows for the reverence of their elements and even their deification alongside all the components of the environment that contribute to the survival of their communities. The feedback loop between these societies and the natural elements was so close in the pre-Hispanic era that they developed a series of worldviews associated with the land, water, hills, and other physical elements. The result of this mutual bond was a philosophical conceptualization of humanity and the cosmos, one that originated and developed during the pre-Hispanic period but continues to the present day. The cultural heritage of Mesoamerican civilization has been enriched and reworked throughout the centuries of the colonial period, the 19th and the 20th centuries, and up to the present day. The indigenous world is alive, as is its belief system. The worldviews of the different indigenous peoples in Mexico are filled with practices, ceremonies, and mythical narratives associated with the fundamental components of the natural environment. They reflect ancestral knowledge and updated understanding of the necessary conditions to sustain social well-being. Within their communal ways of life, there exists a special relationship between societies and the elements of nature. Water and land, for example, form a combination that represents existence itself, giving rise to other forms that shape the cultural landscape, such as hills, volcanoes, and winds. Their knowledge and practices not only constitute a fundamental part of the communal culture for the different peoples in Mexico, but also offer opportunities for reflection on social and philosophical matters, thereby providing significant elements of ecological policies in Mexico's industrialized societies and the world at large in the face of the threat of destruction and annihilation of life on the planet. What happens is that the relationship established with the earth and its elements at different levels produces a certain type of ecosystem, which becomes a metaphor for how we inhabit the world, arising from the significance we attribute to a place. When a space is cared for, respected, and socialized within, it becomes a landscape, a system of directions and productions, an aspiration, a hope, a home for the entire human community. Let us therefore study the reciprocity that has been woven for centuries between indigenous people and nature itself, which translates not into individual benefit but into collective well-being, embodied in their historical memory, beliefs, work, daily practices, religious celebrations, and the relationship of respect and equity towards the environment and the elements of the natural world. Chapter 1: A Millennial Civilization: Experience, Knowledge, and Wisdom of Indigenous Peoples. Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica is a conceptual model to explain a culturally and historically configured area that is not static, but rather a cultural world that constantly transforms and adapts to the conditions presented each day. However, as a whole, Mesoamerica is a space that has undergone profound civilizational processes, where the defining cultural traits are based on the prolonged interaction between humans and their environment, allowing for the historical development of the entire region. Being a millennial space from a human and cultural perspective means that there are long-lasting domains that endure over time, such as geography, environment, territory, and all the natural elements that were available and allowed for different regional adaptations to shape the pace of their cultural transformation for these indigenous peoples. With accessible natural resources and their utilization, the foundation of their worldviews was constructed, where their physical space of natural and geographic reference takes on a social and cultural dimension, imprinting a symbolic representation onto their landscape. The territory that comprises present-day Mexico was part of a civilization that spanned at least 4,000 years. It is a geographic, cultural, and historical area where human groups settled and exchanged products, ideas, and knowledge at an interregional level. Throughout the millennia, practical experiences accumulated and integrated, primarily based on the natural cycles involved in the agricultural process. The results became a shared wisdom that allowed Mesoamerican peoples to successfully adapt to their environment and achieve significant technological, material, and spiritual accomplishments. All those millennia-old knowledge and wisdom were stored in biological and cultural memory and were transmitted through multiple indigenous languages, resulting in a rich and wise worldview that still persists among indigenous groups in Mexico. In other words, the Mesoamerican civilization shaped general paradigms that transcended time and traversed regions. Its historical heritage consists of fundamental principles that serve as organizing principles for common existence and were culturally encoded to be inherited by subsequent generations that are still alive. Mesoamerica is one of the few regions in the world that achieved high levels of complexity in its socioeconomic, political, and spiritual organization, as well as exceptional sophistication in terms of its observations and interpretations of the physical world in its global functioning. Mesoamerican state societies developed institutions that recorded and safeguarded the knowledge of their farmers, who were closely tied to their cultivated lands. Indeed, it was the peasant societies that formed the economic base of this civilization and developed practical knowledge around agriculture, correlating natural cycles with the daily life of societies. Corn, land, and community. The human groups that settled in the territory now known as Mexico were inevitably linked to the land, precisely as the essential platform that gives life and provides the fertile power to the main product, corn. Corn is the element around which all social forces move, articulated and in constant feedback. Corn is the result of this interaction between the social world and the natural world. It is a great example of a plant that responds to the intentional care of human beings. On its own, it could not adapt, diversify, or evolve. Its use, cultivation, and propagation depended on human action and the systematic observation of its cycles. In Mesoamerica, the plant developed successfully, which means that a whole system of human subsistence was established around it. Agriculture is the foundational phenomenon and activity of the indigenous groups, and corn is the central element of the Mesoamerican ancestral heritage. When talking about agricultural practices, we must also refer to what is called an ecosystem, understood as an adaptive complex that includes all the conditions of its environment and is built within a prolonged series of interactions between the specialized group and its surroundings. An ecosystem is a complex unit where there is a correlation between human beings and the environment. Therefore, the promotion of a certain type of social organization has allowed for feedback with nature and the results it begins to yield. Hence, if we want to talk about corn in terms of its ecosystem, we must consider that a permanent and very long-lasting contact between both parts was necessary for the integration process to occur, which, in turn, promoted a highly coordinated social and political organization. The first farmers. If Mesoamerican civilization was consolidated through this foundational relationship, it was the Olmec farmer who worked the land in an organized manner with various techniques such as field cultivation, fallowing, slash and burn, as well as the development of the first irrigation works, including canal systems, terracing in the valleys, slopes, and even wetlands. Gradually, different types of land use and agricultural systems were implemented to expand cultivable areas and increase agricultural yields. Through coordinated labor, available tools, and methods, a social skill of increasing complexity was formed. In particular, the irrigation systems reflect a technical and political organizational force. This combination of elements permanently altered the topography, leading to the transformation of landscapes and the overall configuration of Mesoamerican territoriality. Another key aspect for the successful development of agricultural activity millennia ago, among the Olmecs and later among the Maya and Zapotec civilizations, was its widespread diffusion through cultural contacts with different ethnic groups. Alongside the accumulation of practical knowledge, such as improved climate prediction and the plant's own adaptive capabilities in diverse soil, climate, altitude, and latitude conditions. Additionally, it was likely through cooking and primarily women's labor that agriculture could reach its full potential in this vast Mesoamerican region where there were no draft animals or plows. In summary, the production and utility of agriculture relied on manual care and human attention, primarily by women, which led to the development of multiple techniques and practices for its proper management. In any case, the various paths taken in the development of corn gave rise to a wide range of races and varieties as cultural regions. The same applies to everything related to agriculture, its conditions, production, and practices, which produced as many cultural responses as there were ethnic groups in the Amerindian continent. The territory and landscapes of Mexico. The territories of ancient Mexico were shaped as sites of symbolic references. Each Mesoamerican landscape became a sacred geography through the connections between social groups and the settlement locations, where certain collective values were gathered. A sense of belonging was formed. A cultural identity was linked to the land. The environment, already inhabited and modified by the ethnic groups of ancient Mexico, is now a common good, not only because human relationships are established within it, but also because it is the result of an emotional response to the land, where a specific mode of work and a communal and cohesive lifestyle are realized. However, indigenous territoriality must be understood within long-term processes. This means that agricultural sedentarism allowed for a holistic, complete, and orderly worldview. In this indigenous cosmology, corn is not only the central axis for the subsistence of ancient societies, but it also shaped the way of understanding the world and one's own existence, equating it with the development of the corn plant itself. For the miracle of the grain to occur, its substance, the land, was also cultivated and venerated, along with the vital liquid and all the other natural components involved in the vegetative cycle, including the specificities of the environment and climate regimes. Thus, This set of beliefs allowed for the configuration not only of a symbolic interpretation of nature, but also created a cosmological structure that can still be perceived in the acts of recreation through current indigenous rituals, which persist among Mexican peasants and traditional communities. All the knowledge transmitted through countless indigenous languages and regions, and whose interpretation has adapted within the structure we call a cosmological worldview, materializes in the ritual life that is regularly and periodically carried out in the countryside and towns of Mexico. The ritual practices revolve around the surrounding environment, which involves the entire process from seed selection and planting to blessing, celebration, and consumption. All of these are sacred acts that are part of a cultural continuity and still today strengthen the bonds of identity within popular religiosity. In all its forms and times, corn occupies a central place in the ancestral heritage of Mesoamerica, not only in the organized festivals around the agricultural cycle, but also in Mexican cuisine and dining, without exclusivity to any particular location or precise region. But above all, the productive activities and ceremonial life of peasant societies and popular cultural neighborhoods account for the social structures and ancestral cosmology. Their entire culture revolves around the milpa, which is the quintessential cultivated land and the traditional reference point for their community organization, encompassing interpersonal relationships as well as relationships with deities and natural forces. This is made possible, to a large extent, by the conditions that have endured over time, until these last decades when the environment is threatened and undergoing the current climate crisis. The diverse biodiversity of the Mexican territory has allowed ancient concepts about the environment and surroundings to endure, and social practices related to the milpa, at the domestic and local scale, still strengthen and foster integration with the natural environment, where religious concepts and symbolic contents are manifested. Work in the fields is an activity that inherently involves the consecration of space through ritual. Organized work carried out collectively, with broad participation from its members, still relies on love and dedication in their relationship with the natural environment, to which they still feel connected and deeply involved. Both productive activities and religious life expressed in the surrounding landscape represent the tangible aspect of the ancient worldview and explain the territorialities of social groups. In other words, even today, the development of rural areas and the community practices of indigenous peoples are based on knowledge and the use of biodiversity, as coexistence with the environment endures, albeit in changing circumstances and diverse contexts. In any case, a closeness and coexistence with animals, insects, plants, and crops are embraced in spaces where they balance and regulate each other. It is a subsistence culture that understands that by taking care of the land, which is their habitat, they keep their own home healthy and reproductive, the only possible home for the existence of all living beings. Time and calendar. The wisdom of concrete reality, which includes the geographical and environmental aspects, historically emerged from systematic observation and interaction with the surroundings, interpreted by ancient specialists of the land and the sky. Mesoamerican peoples worship the brightest celestial bodies, especially the sun, the moon, and Venus. They also observed other stars and represented them with symbolic figures. They recorded the Milky Way, eclipses, comets, and other celestial bodies through complex calculations, which were documented, for example, in the Dresden Codex or Maya stelae and buildings. The entire record of astronomical knowledge aimed to act upon and influence natural cycles for their own benefit, thus contributing to the forces that activated the physical world for the proper functioning of cosmic dynamism. Over the millennia, a comprehensive explanation of the natural world was articulated, connecting its regular cycles with the coordination of social activities among Amerindian peoples. Human groups do not perceive or think of space and time in abstract terms, but rather through the relationships woven from their collective practices in a representational manner. In the case of time, it is captured in the calendar, and it seems as if the calendar itself calculates and orders the sequence of the continuous flow of events, both natural and social. This civilization found a formula to encode and represent the series of natural changes and their periodic cycles, turning the Mesoamerican calendar into a communication tool for guiding social life through symbolic language. The Mesoamerican calendar reached such sophistication that it employed a dual counting system, the agricultural or tropical year and the ritual year. These are two parallel accounts with their respective numerical series, based on a vigesimal system. The agricultural calendar consisted of 365 days, representing the apparent movement of the sun, organized into 18 20-day periods plus 5 additional days, each dedicated to a group of deities. The ritual calendar, on the other hand, consisted of 260 days divided into 20 periods of 13 days each. Both accounts were integrated to form periods of 52 years or Shipuwali, which marked the celebration of the new fire or the beginning of a new era. Primarily, the ancient body of knowledge about the natural environment governed the community in relation to the primary economic activity in these latitudes, agriculture. Thus, the systematic observation of natural cycles was not a matter of divination, but was grounded in social use and practical utility within the Mesoamerican calendar. It involved precise tracking of the sun's course and other repetitive periods of celestial cycles. For example, the 365 days of solar movement culturally represented a cycle divided into periods of 260 plus 105 days, or in terms of trecenas, groups of 13 days, and veintenas, groups of 20 days. The orientations of the sun, its rises and sets, divided the year into 4 seasons, the beginning in February, which the fallow land is prepared, April and May, signifying planting, August, when the first ears of corn appeared, and October, the time of harvest. Space and architecture. All astronomical knowledge and ideas about the cosmos derived from such wisdom materialized in pre-Columbian settlements. The dimensions, distributions, directions, and structures of their buildings are, in fact, calendar guidelines. This is because the conceptualization of the universe, culturally interpreted, projects into multiple images and specific geographical points to take shape in their stone temples. The Great Plateau and terraces created by the Olmecs of San Lorenzo are an example of models that recreate the cosmic order in the form of a quadrant with a center, aiming to organize social life around the sacred center or axis. Maya and Teotihuacan public architecture also represent the worldview on a small scale or reflect the design of the cosmos. In temples, priests, astronomers, and architects held the corpus of knowledge about astronomy, mathematics, geometry, engineering, and geography. Countless observatories, juego de pelota, ball court, citadels, temples, murals, and other artistic expressions were built based on those principles. They capture the cycles of nature as analogies of the moving world, and all their components are represented by the union of opposites, water and fire linked to bring together the earth and the sky. Sacred spaces can be any entity or element of nature and can be represented in rock paintings found in canyons, caves, and crevices in Baja California or Oaxaca, for example. They can also be found in major ceremonial centers like Tenochtitlan, where a series of both public and private rituals took place. Ritual, or artistic expressions, possessed a mythical connotation, as well as a sacred connection to the surrounding populated world of animated beings, including the living and the dead, the sun, stars, and the moon, volcanoes and clouds, and the water of lakes and rain. In summary, the artists and sages of pre-Hispanic times left behind great works of art that express their integral cosmology, such as the paintings of Bonampak or Cacaxtla, to name two iconic examples. The planning and construction of Mesoamerican cities allowed for the alignment of astronomical positions or orientations with relevant dates of the annual cycle. However, it was necessary to mark sunrises and sunsets, as well as solstices and equinoxes, among other key dates. Therefore, ceremonial sites were oriented perpendicular or parallel to conspicuous points in the surrounding geography or towards certain topographical features, aligned in a way that the layout was ordered by invisible axes, but for practical recording purposes. This is evident in Cholula, Teotihuacan, Xochicalco, Chichen Itza, Izapa, Copan, and Tenochtitlan. Thus, the physical reality and cultural universe that socially order Mesoamerican peoples were embodied and concretized in one of the greatest achievements of this civilization, the Mesoamerican calendar. Urban sites in Mesoamerica not only symbolize a spatial position of geographical nature, but also, by accumulating knowledge about seasons, climates, celestial phenomena, and hydrological cycles, they developed the necessary awareness to position themselves within certain spatial coordinates and operate notions of time that were assembled in a mathematical register. Now, what is particular about this way of conceiving space and time in the region of the Americas between the tropics? First, the realization that there was an intense exchange of knowledge between peoples of different latitudes, for example, between Teotihuacan and some Mayan cities such as Izapa, Copan, and Caminaljuyo. This exchange aimed to understand the two zenith passages and, in general, to achieve the standardization of a basic Mesoamerican calendar. In any case, based on this fundamental position and observation, a symbiotic relationship between geographical features and human settlements was sought, the integration of the sky and the landscape, and, in turn, with architecture as a whole. All of this was done to express, or rather, to propose and spread models on a cosmic scale.
End of the part 1.